Now being recorded.
Okay, we're a little early.
Actually, we're right on the money.
We're right on the money, but Cynthia always has an issue trying to get here from school legally, so I think that we're going to, proceed past the meeting minutes, because I haven't seen them, and I think that was Cynthia. So, review the planning board priority list for city council input. Do you have the most recent one, Doug?
No, I do not.
Here, I did extras.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And basically, the planning board and the city council were right in the same, on the same page. So that was actually good to see. I think at this point, all we really need is, city council approval and recommendations for the planning board to proceed. So you can see that the ranks are the downtown revitalization plan, the growth policy, the ADU structure and definition, review the state regulations, airport master plan, and then you come down to the other green one, which is minimum lot size, which is actually gonna be covered under state regulations. And then we come down further, the annexation, de-annexation, and building on city-owned land. So all the ones in green are the ones that we see as highest priority, not the order in which they do this, but the highest priority. And then the ones in, yellow would come next. And you can see the ones in red that were just the lowest priority. So I guess we just need a vote of this board to approve this, to send to city council for approval. Any comments, questions?
No surprises, I don't think. I think we all discussed it, and it looks good.
Okay. And then we'll just,
Technically, how did you get to a sense? I know it wasn't me helping. Did you just go back and redo it? And
I didn't redo anything. This came from the planning board. They took what we gave them,
I saw that one.
added
Okay.
theirs together, and felt that we were all on the same page anyway. So there's the good news.
Cool.
Except that some of them did, want to revisit outdoor advertising and STRs. And I think the only reason they wanted to revisit it is because there might have been things within that zoning change that they really wanted, but the whole thing got tanked altogether. They feel that because those were put together, that they both failed when maybe one would have passed.
Yeah.
But, again, it's not our highest priority, when we have things that we actually have to do. Rocky Fork Inn, this is fun, grant match options, resolution is needed. On the Rocky Fork Inn, she's coming in, by the way. I don't know what grant options we may or may not have. We know that we have to come up with 25% of basically 1.4 million. Welcome.
I can offer I can offer some input. So, and there's some confusions and some questions that have come up, and some as I was talking to. So what the takeaways are, and I have a question into Sarah, phrased basically this way. We had a big all-hands SWAT call on it, and the biggest takeaway we took away from it is the maximum that they will do is 75%. That FEMA program will pay out.
That's the maximum.
That's the maximum they pay out. So there was some discussion about a state grant that I think we understood they poo-pooed because it didn't take effect in time to apply to something that was previously there.
Okay.
They had talked about, and this was where my follow-up question is, they had talked about all these different match options that we could do. So like if we're taking stuff out and donating it to Habitat for Humanity, basically. But then toward the end of the call, one of the things that came up is that the property owner can, in essence, donate the 25%, which is another way of saying they accept 75% and call it done. The follow-up question that I had is, if the city comes up with cash matches, be it state grants or other grant funding sources, or money out of our pocket, which there's resistance to, I see how it impacts the property owners. But let's suppose we come up with, we dump in and they gave us this Team Rubicon group that we can call that comes out and does it. And let's suppose we do all of that stuff and we log our hours and we help demolish this, that, and the other and cover that 25%. Unless I'm missing something, that doesn't help the property owners out at all.
I thought the same thing.
Whether we give 12.5 and they give 12.5, or they give the full, the answer is they don't have any more in their pocket if it's not a, and so I have reached out and said, did I miss something? Or we've got to spend a whole bunch of effort and energy and paperwork that really doesn't yield anything of benefit to the property owners.
Because the property owners are looking for 100%.
Well,
Cash.
they're looking for as much as they can get, absolutely. And by the way, there has now been a follow-up call that has been initiated, and I have requested a meeting with the owner of the Eagles Nest. Oh, we're setting up the meeting.
Sean is going ahead.
So we are setting up a meeting to investigate and ask more questions to see if it's something he's interested in pursuing.
He should.
And but again, going back to, and now that takes me back to Rocky Fort, I have to look at scalable, because I have people who love the property owners. Hey, I'm glad this program is available, that they're there, they're able to get their money out of it. But at the same time, we have lots of people who are impacted by the flood that aren't being made whole. What logic is the city using to say we are putting cash out of our city buckets to help one victim versus not another victim? And there's logic to that argument. Now, when it comes to, we're gonna pay dollars to put a park on it or do, if we have to come up and do the match and the demolition, that's a different conversation, because now that's a city asset that we're spending dollars and
Right.
stuff into. But as I'm just kind of logging the complaints, and that, my first thought when we came out of the meeting last week was, we need to do everything that we can to help our property owners be as whole as is possible. But that's when I kind of circled around and was doing the math in my head. I said, ooh, how does us donating labor help them get more in their pocket? And I don't know the answer. There may be something that I'm missing.
I don't think
But I didn't see it.
My take on that was that, say, I don't know if the Joliet group and the demolition is still on the table, that could potentially be 12.5% of the,
But see, that's cash coming in, and so we're still chasing down that conversation.
okay, so it would just be less that they'd have to give up.
Right, if they give up 12.5% versus 25%. So it's like I said, any other source of funding, I think we have a responsibility to chase down all of those sources of funding anywhere and everywhere we can, and I'm comfortable with that. But when we were looking at the other non-cash contribution, like when we were looking at resort tax, why is my city dollars going to help victim X but not victim Y?
Right.
Why, if it comes out of general fund, why are my property tax dollars going to help victim X and not victim Y? So I'm all on board for chasing down every other funding source that we can have. But part of that was we were spending all this time thinking about, well, this counts as a match. We talked about Team Rubicon, and we talked, and then there was suddenly this conversation, this click in my brain that says, how does that help the property owners? And I've written that question, I don't know what the answer is yet, but I have asked there that question specifically.
So we'll wait till you get a response before we go further.
Yeah, we're not doing anything further on that, right? I mean, and that'll be something that comes to here and then comes to you guys, so.
Out of curiosity, there were other homes that were totally destroyed. Is FEMA offering them 75% of the pre-flood?
Only if it's in the floodway, because they don't want people to rebuild in the
So
floodway.
this one
So-
is
so-
different because it's in the floodway. So
Right.
So the house on Platt that was destroyed,
It's not even probably in the special flood hazard area,
So
so,
basically what they're
FEMA
doing
would
is
not do
driving
anything.
people not to build there again.
Right.
not to build in the floodway.
And so that's why the Eagles Nest may be in that discussion,
yeah. it
is
would be.
don't build in the flood, it's like, and so when we had the conversation, when I had the conversation with him, it was basically in terms of, they will pay out a max of 75% of the disaster value of it. Is that something that you are interested in, I should set up the meeting? And the answer was yes.
You won't be like that tree.
I'm not saying it's gonna go anywhere, I'm just,
But it's,
is it, are you chair?
Mhm.
yes. Yes.
And I think one of the things, the FEMA grant was open to anyone, and it still is open to anyone.
A different cycle.
Bucket, this is Red Lodge bucket. The Rocky Fork tied into another bucket of leftover money from another disaster. So they jumped ahead. And mainly because FEMA and the state wanted to get something visible to help encourage others to apply for this money. But the property owner has to give up ownership of the property.
Ah,
Yeah,
And
it's,
it,
they're,
and it becomes public property. It's a
Because-
transfer from private to public.
and I am happy to have that conversation with anybody, I am happy to have that conversation, explain that to anybody who has questions about it, and we'll make that known in our public meetings whenever we see that opportunity come out, I mean, aside from this public meeting. But again, the other part of that story is, A, they're giving up their property to get it, and B, it's not your tax dollars, it's not your resort tax dollars that are gonna be going to that. And so at that point, I can feel very comfortable about how we justify if we have to spend some money to help turn it into a park, or we have to do some things like that. But there was a clear resistance of, why are we helping
them and
victim
us.
X and not victim Y? And so there's a whole bunch of different variables that are there.
I mean, it absolutely is dependent on where the property is, I mean,
Yes.
on what qualifies. And there's very few properties in the floodway that had the amount of damage where someone would be willing to
Give up the property.
give up their property.
Yeah,
So, I mean, and.
and there's
because
one of
it
them
was
that I know
not-
that's rebuilding.
Yeah,
Their
that's,
plan is to
as long as
rebuild.
it's under 50% damage, they can rebuild. I mean, there is that option, it just, even if it's in the floodway, you can rebuild as long as it's not over 50%
And I
damage.
don't even know, from the conversation that we had, maybe Rod could answer something different, but one of the key comments that came out of our note is, there isn't a mechanism for them to prohibit or force you to give up your property rights. And that's why this program exists, so I don't know where that
And-
50% comes in, or,
It's.
that may have just been one of the
That's a
also
federal
blocks
law.
that had to be checked. that
No,
they
that's
were
a federal
qualified.
law, and I learned this, from selling flood insurance. If a property in a floodway is over 50% damaged, the federal government basically says it's condemned. And you cannot build there, you just have to clean it up and walk away.
But I'm not aware of any properties in Red Lodge that were informed they were condemned.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, there's a lot of that building left where technically, I don't even know that it reached that point. You know, it's
But-
been
but
damaged
it's-
more and
it's-
more as
It's
it's
an,
sat
it's
there.
an incentive or a bribe to get you not to
It
build
is,
there,
yeah.
to turn your private property into
And-
public property.
And because we would be turning it into a park, we could use resort tax money to help make up that difference.
But we will get blowback if we do. And if it happens at the first, well, let me take it a step further. Rocky Fork comes in and says, I want in.
Rocky Fork.
I'm sorry, Eagles Nest comes in and says, I want in, how many of those really, so, because the feedback that I get back is specifically, why are we using city money
The city's going to own it.
help make one, and that's part of how we approached this initially. We were
Right.
selling it as this, we're getting a discount park,
Right.
and there's still pushback from it.
Okay,
Right,
here's
and-
another-
That's,
there will
ultimately,
be.
that's your decision,
There-
that's
there
gonna
will
be
be,
council's
but-
decision.
I mean, I think to me, it's more about explaining the process to people who
Yeah.
have those concerns. I
Yeah.
mean, there's only basically 2 properties in Red Lodge that qualified for this.
Okay, here's
So-
the other question, is FEMA comes in, purchases the Rocky Fork Inn for 75% of pre-flood value. Now it belongs to the feds or the public.
It belongs to the city,
It belongs to the
but we're constrained on what
only
we can do with it.
That's what, who gets to do the demolition?
That's a separate grant that comes in to do that, so we have funding, but that becomes our responsibility, because we bought the mess, we bought
We
the,
bought the mess.
we
We
bought
buy
it.
it as is.
yeah.
Yep.
We bought the mess, so it's.
We would now be to take this to Eagles Nest, we would now be the proud owners of the Eagles Nest. So before we sign on to that, we wanna make sure that we have a really good funding source that's gonna come in and do that demolition.
But then, as well, you can recycle the, whatever you can save from that.
It can be donated, it can't be sold.
Recycle, but still, there's.
And that's, we were all like, yay, yay, yay,
But once
yay, and we
you
were being
own
all
it,
creative.
Once you own it, it belongs to you.
But that goes toward, if anything were to be taken off and sold, it comes out of the 75%, not out of the 25%. That's just part of their rules. And so that's where that split came afterwards, like, so let's suppose we do all of that. And we come up with the full amount, but it doesn't put another dime
Or it still
in their
doesn't,
pocket,
let's just say that they approve the $75,000 because
5%.
75%, because that's the best they can do. Then it reverts to the city. Then the city has to do the demolition, and the city owns the property and the site, therefore the city can do whatever the city wants.
No, the city does whatever the federal government told them they were allowed to do in order to get the 75%.
But they're no longer,
No, they, yeah.
They come back.
Is this your first time working with the federal government?
It's the same as like when I was in college, if I had a federal grant and I wanted to do work study, if I got work study, they took it out of my grant. Because it was grant money,
because they can.
because they
So
can.
we're gonna wait until you hear back.
Yeah, I don't know, I have nothing more to add at this level for this discussion.
Okay.
Other than it is possible that it might not be this one property.
Okay, Chelsea, did you
That
have
would fall
something to
under a
add?
different grant.
Or, yeah,
It would
that's,
fall under this grant, it would just be a continuation.
and it can't be a federal grant, it has to be something not federal dollars. So any state grant or any other grant that's out there, we have,
already.
no,
Because it
because,
can't be federal
because
and
the
federal.
rules
Right,
say
we've
only
only done one.
75, you can't, you 75% max federal money.
Okay, gotcha, that's right. I remember we did that. Okay. Okay, and we did skip over the Yellowstone Wildlife Sanctuary Resolution review, which we don't, we should have it in our packet. Have you guys read your packet for tonight? My only comment on that, if you had a chance to read through it, was the city is coming out on top of this, because the land that the city is getting is usable and buildable. The land that the Yellowstone Wildlife is getting, they can't build on, and it will have a permanent easement on it. So honestly, the idea of getting a broker price opinion on the values of both of those are going to be greatly reduced. The city's gonna come out way ahead in that kind of a swap. Not only that, but I checked the FEMA map for flood, the land that we would be getting for the exchange is actually in the floodway.
Is it in the floodway or the special flood hazard area?
As
Those two
hard as
different things.
I was having trouble reading that on that map because I didn't have all the things, but it's definitely affected by Rock Creek.
Okay.
So we'll call it flood affected area,
Okay.
and whoever does a price evaluation on it's gonna take that into consideration, plus you can't build on it because it has the easement is there. So honestly, the Yellowstone Wildlife the city should be happy to do that kind of an exchange.
So one of the things that's on here, because one of the requirements is that the city has to get the equal or greater, I just noticed it says equal or greater acreage. What he had said was equal or greater value before, and so those two are not, because he said this does not meet that criteria, so it's like it has to check every single box.
But the city would get.
To me, if the city's
greater
coming
value.
out and ahead,
Yeah,
I'm not sure where number 3 comes in, because my understanding was always equal or greater value.
that the city would get equal.
That the city gets equal or greater value,
And
and I
the
think
city
that's,
would.
and I think that's met. The other, feedback that I got, on this just changing is, a request from, so I did share this with, the executive director, BR, down there, and they came back and they had some concerns about this, the wording where it says, to resolve an encroachment, because they said, we've got a written agreement, they put in that they did all of this, encroachment is just a nasty word, let's not do that, and I didn't have a concern or issue with that. But, yeah, so I think that's some of the changes that'll come up. The goal is for you guys to be able to talk about whatever changes you want to make, decide if you want to move forward. The documentation's there now, and hopefully that helps make it a little bit easier. We didn't even discover until our public works director went in, that all of their buildings are sitting on city land, which is where that stripe comes in.
I wondered what that
From
stripe
that,
was.
yeah, so if you look at, if you go to like the before, of where the current,
Talk about
it
encroachment, is that what you're saying?
yeah, it does, well, and that picture, I don't think is the right picture.
Which picture you're trying to look at? I'm talking about that arc on the bottom. Okay. With the blue,
Yeah, right here in hood.
that they had to give that up simply because,
Oh, actually, this is, so if you look at the yellow is their current property. And notice that their buildings are kind of all skiwampus on the lines over that. And the red is the fence.
the red is the fence.
Yeah.
So there is encroachment already, but we don't wanna call it that.
Well, the theory was, we built where they told us to build, and so don't come back and call it encroachment.
So I thought we came to an agreement, both sides are happy.
Well, they are and they do. This is
A recommendation
the resolution that we're gonna take action on next time. So this is not just in concept, what we've talked about is in concept and in principle, now's the details.
Okay.
And the idea is you guys are gonna, whatever suggestions you come back with, then that's what's gonna be up for action in 2 weeks' time.
And our job here is to, if we need to make any changes, to recommend to city council. If you've read through it and it looks fine to you, then the three of us will say, does it look fine to you? And we'll go aye, and we'll send our recommendation of no changes.
Yeah, so the other thing to throw out there is, one of the things we had a heck of a time with this time was getting stuff back from the city attorney as we were coming up closer to the deadline.
Yes.
Need a response. One of the concessions that is made, given that we represent 15 to 20% of his workload, and the other 85% is the prosecution side. Wednesday is all day in court, Thursday is theoretically, his date's not here from the 32 hours. So one of the requests that I'm gonna be making is that we get stuff to him by Wednesday night, end of day, that we wanna have on the agenda, so he has basically a week turnaround time. Now, my initial request was gonna be that we send it to him. In thinking about it, I think that's not the right approach, because that borders really close to council directing staff. And so I think it is send it to me, and I don't have an issue with carboning him on it, because what I don't wanna do is become a slowdown in the, if it's a day like Thursday, I'm teaching Thursday, I don't wanna be a slowdown in the system, make sure something doesn't get, I mean, I'm still behind on my email today, and I've been doing nothing but all day long, so. So I'll get that worked out between now
So
and the
anyway, the
meeting.
bottom line is the three of us are okay with the current resolution for
Yeah.
Yellowstone One, okay. Now, Rocky Fork Inn, do we need to write a resolution? Or what is, what's our role at this point?
So I think eventually there will be a resolution to do it. Coming back to the who writes it, and this is kind of the part of the conversation that we just had, we actually have, you guys all have a template in the book of how to write a resolution.
Okay.
Plus, we have online the complete history of resolutions in Red Lodge for templates. So we should take a stab at it. Council should take a stab at it and put it together, and work it in this group. And that's what you should share in this group, and then after you make the changes in this group, then it goes out to him Wednesday, and so we have the attorney bought off version.
Okay, so
And then
eventually
somewhere
we'll write a resolution.
Yes, when it becomes appropriate to do so.
Okay. Rodeo Park, potential MOU versus lease and long-term considerations. I saw Rodeo Park in our,
It's on this one, and it's also in the parks one, and so there's a land swap, which puts it in land use. And then it's also on it's a park, which puts it in public works. So it made it to both of them
Yes,
on the
it
work
did.
agendas, but, and ultimately it's all council.
so.
And I don't know
our-
how much they're gonna
our
get
role?
to it tonight.
Yeah,
The role there is gonna be, it's gonna be exactly, well, actually, not exactly the same, sorry, I'm getting yet another project in my head that I'll tell you about in a minute.
so, since they're not gonna be building on this land, it would be an MOU,
So
not a lease.
the park is first, and then we'll have MOUs on top of it, yes.
Right, so there would be no lease required.
That would be council's, but that was kind of what the discussion that I heard at the last council meeting.
The only reason why a lease was ever really brought up is because they have an existing lease right now. And in order to get them to give up the lease with the airport board that they have right now, and not take them to court over it, you know, a discussion may need to be had, does the city just do the lease instead? And,
Take ownership of the
yes, but,
Or
so,
offer
I
to
mean,
do.
that's part of it. And then the other part would be, you know, because right now they do have a lease, which gives them more abilities and authority over that parcel of land. And as we know, MOUs can be easily broken by the next administration
Or by either party.
or by either party.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I were on the airport board, just saying, I probably don't know that I would trust an MOU.
Do you mean the rodeo board?
Yeah, if I were on the rodeo board.
And
do we
that's-
know
Sorry,
the
that's
terms
what I
of
meant.
that? Do we know the
Yeah.
terms of that lease?
Yes, we have
I heard
a,
rumors.
I have a copy of it, and I can be happy to get you a copy of what it is.
Why don't we look at that next time and then we can keep?
This is about the first step, which is a park. So the goal is to get a resolution of intent to establish a park, if you guys are okay with it.
But that doesn't give us any, why would we do that if they already have a lease? Change control?
Because-
We can't unilaterally change that, they have a lease.
No, and it's not going to, so let me back up. Airports have a lot of land. Talk to anybody on an airport, they say more is better. Why? There's
Because
two
they
reasons.
crash.
No, because they crash in designated spots. It's because it allows you to have control over compatible use. One of the goals of the airport negotiations is to narrow the amount of land that's there to what's necessary for the airport. We still have how do we ensure the compatible use next to it? Nobody's worried about it since the beginning of time because it was airport land. We're making it a park more in conjunction with shrinking the airport, and then we go back and revisit the MOU. It's still all in the same thing, but the park is not dependent on either of those steps. But what happens next in those steps will be greatly eased by the existence of a park.
Because you're not gonna go build condos on the park or workforce housing in a park.
How about an observatory?
Don't go there.
So, my thought is, why would the city go ahead, pass a resolution to create a park when they already have a lease, so they don't need, we can't create a
now
park
they're-
out of their leased land?
No, sure we can.
We can?
It's still city land, they're just leasing the park.
Okay.
So it just, I mean, it's definitely a conversation to be had, and I know David's been working really hard trying to establish that relationship with the Rodeo Association Board.
And my
It's-
2 cents is, I still think that they are going to step away from that lease voluntarily because we're gonna provide them for the protections.
Right.
They entered in that lease out of desperation because they
The
thought they
mayor
were gonna
was-
lose, they were gonna.
Control over it.
Hold on, yeah, they thought they were gonna lose parking and something that's dependent for the rodeo and lots of other events.
Yeah,
And so I still think that once we provide proof that that's not gonna happen, this is a significant step in that process, then it becomes much easier. And if push comes to shove, and we have to take it to court and have a judge tell us that that lease is not valid, I feel pretty good about that option too, but I don't think it's necessary.
okay.
As Golda Meir says in whatever the movie she had that just came out this year, they said, are you willing to start this over such and such? And she said, the world has to believe that I am. You know, are we willing to take them to court over this? The world has to believe that we will.
Yeah,
But we're gonna do everything in our power to address what their needs and concerns, which I think it's literally the same situation as the sanctuary. There's not competing interests. It's just, the reality is they should have set that up as a park in 1958 when they gave the land to
when
us.
they gave the land, they should not have given that land, frankly.
Well,
Yeah, but whatever.
so somebody should write, and if, we should go back and look at, find a resolution that has been done to establish a park, there's 2 or 3 of them in there,
Recent one.
and then find it. If there are places you feel it needs to be nailed down better, so it doesn't get, then address that in your resolution. It's just that, it's going back to Doug's comment, there's part of this conversation, which is where we all reach consensus, now we have to take the actions to formalize it.
Okay, so, okay, final resolution to establish a park. There was one very recent. Okay. Okay, so revise the use of city land policy to include event policy. Could we have whatever form it is it's online, an event application? Isn't that what we have to do, is revise?
So,
form?
and just for the record, you guys, I think the question is, do we or don't we? I know that your council president is like, I don't wanna touch this for a while. This is one of those things that I don't wanna revisit right now. The question that I raised was that all of the discussions or battles and stuff that we have had about land use,
Mhm.
let me use one of the easiest ones to identify, the Harley,
Event.
yeah, Beartooth Rally uses land for camping. One of the things that previous councils have talked about is a resolution to recover fees of an event. So in other words, if we had to have 2 or 3 additional officers in town because of the Beartooth Rally, then we have the right to do that. Well, here's the problem. All they're asking for is camping. Do we need 2 to 3 officers because of their camp spot? No, they have 30 of their own security up there. They don't need anything from us. And so it goes back to an event. So like 4th of July is an event. Now, the reason that that's been done out of the past and that they're not paying for additional police and whatnot is because the city was a co-sponsor, which is also a mechanism
We
that's
are.
here. Pardon?
We are?
I've heard that I was thinking part of that was from you, that there is, I'm still looking for the paper trail.
There-
But again,
no.
do we solve it by being a co-sponsor?
I wouldn't.
But again, that's something, that's an event. If you expect to bring in this many people, add 2 officers. If alcohol, add 3, you know? So that's, all it was is, do you guys want to do it? The direction that I have as mayor was, I said, I am not comfortable arbitrarily telling this event they need to write a check for 2,000, and this event they need to do 5,000, because I've witnessed how that's been done, and it's too much of a lawsuit. Make it a worksheet, just like our resort tax worksheet, or any worksheet you do for anything, that there is no arbitrariness into it. And to me, part of that is, call it an event. policy rather than a land use policy.
Well, the Beartooth Rally last year paid for 2 additional officers.
They got blackmailed into it. They
I
could have
know
sued
they
us,
got
and we'd have lost,
Yeah, I
in my
agree.
opinion.
I agree, I wouldn't have paid it where I had it.
So after, I mean, I was on the event committee for 2 years going through this, and, I just wanna say we redid the camping part of it, so that it was based on the number of people up there staying. So that the more people that were up there, the more they paid. So to me, that was part of the way, you know, a larger scale camping event is gonna bring more people to town. So we were collecting more in fees. It wasn't just a $100 fee a day anymore.
We may have collected the wrong amount, just as an FYI.
Yeah, no, there's a whole deal in there, like if you, and it's a daily rate and based on the number of campers up there.
Now, does this also apply to like the?
4th of July.
Yeah.
And like the bike, Greater Yellow, or the biking?
Right, yeah, they're all supposed to be based on the number of people camping on city-owned land is supposed to be the fee that you're collecting.
So is
And
that,
that's part of how we were going, you know, because the bigger the event, the more campers you have, the more people are gonna be in town.
so we already have something in
We
place?
do, yeah, we just did that.
Okay,
And
But at this
And if
meeting, you
it's
just
not
called it
enough-
event, but then you based it on land use.
we did, because we can figure out a way to charge for an event, because we went down this rabbit hole of like, well,
What if?
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have a big Cynthia's gonna have a big graduation party next year, and she's gonna have 500 people at her house. That's an event. Does she have to get a city permit for a private party like that? That's not really private, you know, the whole high school could show up. I mean, where do you stop? Going down, you know, on these events, where do you stop? They're not utilizing city-owned property, and people will come to Red Lodge because there's an event. It doesn't mean that they were necessarily invited to the event, you know, it's,
Happen across
they
the
just stop, they're going to the park, and they just stop, and they're like, oh, look, there's a party, let's go to the party. I mean,
It happens all the time.
it's this huge rabbit hole, and we want people to come to Red Lodge. I mean, that's where we get our resort tax. And that's why we had started to go the other way about, well, then let's see if we can utilize our resort tax to help offset those event costs, including our police department. But we can't do that yet. And I liked going that route better than all of a sudden penalizing people for having an event. Because it brings people to town, which is our bread and butter, which is our tourism.
So when you think of the car show,
Right,
if they weren't closing off side streets, they're not using city-owned land,
right,
it's an event,
right.
it brings people to town, do they have to pull a permit?
They do use city-owned land.
We do, yeah, but I mean,
know
if
we
we
do.
weren't,
But if they weren't going to use the side streets, close off the side streets for whatever, would they have to?
no, they didn't have to when it was up at the high school. They used to have it up at the high school.
Well, they started off having it downtown without closing off the side streets.
Right,
Registration was at Bone Daddy's,
right.
so,
They did not have to get a permit.
and that didn't hit. So it's really the
It's
use
used-
of city-owned property
Is what causes
is
you,
tied to an event,
right,
an event that uses city-owned property.
right.
And so then you have to break it down to private event and public event.
And well, and we did that by the number of people in attendance. So if you, as a private person, want to lease one of the parks, if it's under 75 people, you don't have to go through and get the full-blown permit. There's just a rental of the park area for as long as it's not overnight. If you're gonna have a wedding reception dinner at Lions Park.
We have one of those.
Yeah, and we have, because people want to, be able to, you know, reserve it. You know, if you're gonna invite 20 kindergartners
closing it
to a
off.
birthday party, then you wanna make sure you're gonna be able to get the tables and the space available, so you're not scrambling to go somewhere else. I mean, other cities do it. And we based ours off of, like, what Whitefish does. A lot of our events that we did are based off of Whitefish.
So-
They're very similar.
So we have, just for the record, we have a wedding dinner that says 100 to 125 people as their guests. No whether that many people show up or don't show up or whatever. But the charge was $100 a day, because that's what it says all over the form.
Well, the $100 a day, because it's over 75 people, it is $100 a day.
Okay, but,
If they were under 75 people, then it's like $25 for a half a day,
so let's go
and $50
to,
for a whole day.
let's go to Beartooth Rally.
Mm-hmm.
The form says $100 a day, and that's,
Form, you'll have to pull the ordinance.
but is our ordinance reflected on the form at all that people fill out?
It should have been updated.
Okay, I think for this committee, I'll pull the forms,
Yeah,
and then send
well,
it
pull
to
the ordinance and the fees that were approved,
forms.
because that should have been put in there.
But it needs to be built into the forms if that's what we're doing.
It does, yes, and I thought that Courtney was updating all the forms.
So I'll start with that, and then I'll put it back on the schedule for next time.
If you need help with that, I'll can pull the ordinance and stuff we passed with the fees. It was in the resolution with the fees as well,
I'll look it up.
and if it didn't get transferred over to the ordinance, over to the forms then, the council passed it.
Okay.
I don't know what else, I don't know who's responsible for updating the forms, but that was.
That should be part of whatever was there, should be reflected in the forms. And that was kind of my observation, is we have a cluster still.
Yeah, and that can easily be fixed, because that has nothing to do with council, it just, the forms need to be updated to reflect the ordinance that was
Well,
passed, and the
and
resolution that was passed.
this form, yeah,
we
I'll let you
didn't
pull up the
approve-
form and look at it.
The council did not approve a form, we approved fee structure for events, for use of city-owned land, basically.
And so that
This
should be
form is
available.
defined by ordinance 960, and now there's a first amended or second amended or
Mhm.
some umpteenth
Is
amended.
number 960? Is that what you said?
That's what the current form that people sign online and get a form for and say, fill this out accordingly and we'll grant it.
But we don't have the newest.
We don't know that it's been updated, we'll check it out on our committee and take care of that. Okay, we're down to procedures to build on city-owned land, like a permanent use, when to have an MOU, when to have a lease. The other point that was brought up was an MOU is a memorandum of understanding of use of the land, but it has nothing to do with building. Once you build, for instance, the Silver Strike is built on city-owned land, they pay property tax on the building. The hangars at the airport are built on city-owned land, they lease the land and pay property tax on the building. Where we really got in the weeds was with the observatory that's built on city-owned land, and so the observatory should be paying property tax, and we should sign a lease and dissolve the MOU. So,
So here's
it
my
fair?
question. How, so this is a council's meeting and that's here. One of the things that I need to do and will do a better job of, I will certainly try. One of the challenges of this role, which all of us are in, is that there are gonna be things that come across that rub us the wrong way, that get under our skin and send our hackles up, and we have to figure out how to get around that. So one of the things I'm gonna be doing is, as we talk about those conversations, let's not go, let's make sure it doesn't come across as this is a battle between
no,
person X and person Y.
no, because if we look into it further, we may find other issues. But the bottom line is that if you're building, and it doesn't mean it's on a permanent foundation, or, maybe the snack shack at the ballpark isn't on a permanent foundation, therefore it can be moved off,
Or we have a backstop down there at the ballpark,
yeah.
but that's, the city owns that.
Well, what about
Yeah.
now building like a new hangar?
So when you do that, you get a lease, you pay for the building, you own the building, you pay the property taxes on the building, and you're leasing land to put it on.
Okay.
And I do not disagree at all that the observatory matches that description in every way in my
But we
mind.
have to be fair, they weren't aware of that when they built it. Just because it wasn't brought, there were so many mistakes in that building. But now that they are there and they have an MOU, we can cancel it, I think within a 30-day notice, but is that fair? And do we have to talk to the tax people to find out if they're, and if they are required to pay property tax on it, being a
Then there's all-
501c3, they might not have to. And maybe that's how we can get through this one, and then just make sure that nothing else happens again.
And the other thing we have to deal with, that we're still looking into the airport, is insurance too. So there's a couple of things in there. Nobody's paying taxes right now because my understanding is they've not yet have a certificate of occupation. So it's technically not done yet. They don't have a,
Do you do that with a hangar too? You get a certificate of occupancy?
you do.
Huh? And what about the snack shack at the ballpark?
I cannot answer that because I do not know.
Is it on the foundation?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Is that the difference between those? Foundation, not foundation? Oh, she has snacks.
What's on your list that is going to make it to council? So the theory, guys, and you tell me if we're wrong or not.
Okay.
If I pull up the agenda for city council tonight,
Got it right here.
the way that we are trying to do this, just so that people know, and again, this is I don't have time to discuss about it, you're springing something on me and asking me to make a decision,
Yeah.
which, by the way, you guys will have that decision tonight, is that from here, everything that we want to be taking action on in 2 weeks, theoretically is down here.
Okay.
And so as you guys put your agendas together, that's kind of, now, it may be here 2 or 3 or 4 times before we get there. This doesn't mean it's one time here and then it's there, but it's here before it makes it to there.
Yeah.
So as you look at your section here, what is it that's ready to, the 2 things that are there is your planning board and a resolution of intent for the wildlife sanctuary. Are those are the things you want to talk about, talk about tonight, to say, hey, we're going to see those on next. Now, you have a bigger list here, and it can go around and round and round and round.
And I'll just
But it
say
should
that.
be here at least once
Okay.
in advance of it going up top.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I was, did you guys go over the priority list before I showed?
Yes.
We basically did, and the bottom line is that the planning board actually agrees with our list.
I like these.
By the way, we can email you this list. Oh, but you're driving through no man's land. Never mind.
Yeah, that was the thing. I was like, oh, I can totally call, but I can't. Heaven
Yeah.
forbid, I knock on the.
No, basically, what they also put in as priorities, went with ours, with a few exceptions.
Okay.
So, I think that
Now,
city
that
council,
list is different and prettier than what's in the packet.
that's because I made it prettier.
The one in the packet it's not ugly.
It's bigger.
This is what I got from the planning board.
Yeah, that one I did not, that was like very challenging.
And then I actually had to mess around with it so that I could get it on one sheet instead of like 5.
Yeah.
I hate those.
And I don't,
Listen to it.
Council President, is that something that requires, that's not really a resolution
It's
or ordinance,
not
is
a
that something you guys can just say tonight?
Yeah.
I move to relay this on?
Yeah, we don't need a resolution or anything, we just wanted to give our input,
And so we.
and we've done that, actually, I think
I
it's
don't,
fine.
talk
I
about it.
think that we should call it as a direction. It's a direction for the planning board.
Directive for planning board.
Don't you think a directive would,
I don't even think you need to, I think we're just giving our input. I mean, I don't really want to tell the planning board what to do, I just like the idea that, please don't work, if you bring this forward, we're probably gonna vote it down, so,
because it wasn't on our
it
list.
wasn't on our list. So it's
Yeah,
not a
don't-
priority.
Don't take off and spend effort on things
I
that
mean, if
we've
they-
not heard of before.
If they want to waste their time on doing some of those things on that list that, we just basically told them we are not going to entertain, and
Well, the
that's
other
on
thing
them.
that came up at the planning board, was that there are things that come in front of the planning board that we didn't foresee in this committee or on the city council, such as we had Brian, the building inspector, come in and was trying to determine whether there was a minimum a minimum house size in Red Lodge, whether a tiny home, and we were having trouble with the definition of tiny home versus a manufactured home, because it's really who who regulates,
Which set of code it's regulated?
which code it's built by, whether it's built by HUD, which is a manufacturer. And in our zoning, our manufactured homes have to be 1,000 square feet minimum. So if it's a tiny home, it can't be a manufactured tiny home, it has to be a stick-built. And we have no minimum.
Can I build a 100-foot stick build in the middle of my 5,000-foot lot?
The answer is yes.
And currently, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So I think with that, when something pops up, the same way we do with any other board,
I bring it back to
You
the
bring it
city
back.
council
Yep.
and say, this came in front of the
Yep.
planning board and they would like to pursue this.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't want, council to micromanage planning board to the extent that little things like that have to go by us before they can work on them.
Well, I think
At all.
I'll update the council
Yeah, and,
on what the planning board
Is working.
and
Yeah,
honestly,
have to.
I don't even really care until it has to come to council for our approval.
Well, but let
You know,
me
it's
play
about-
It
devil's
would have to come.
advocate.
It would have to.
We just want your blessing before we pursue this. Is this something you guys are okay, or do you have any guidance on?
Right, yeah, and normally things like that, I mean, we're not gonna know anything about it. I mean, it's technical
Well, the
building stuff, you
No,
know?
but change to zoning could come back. They may say, you can't build a 100 square foot house on a 5,000 square foot lot. There needs to be some minimums in Red Lodge. And if that's the case, then they're gonna change the zoning, which would come to city council for approval.
Right, and that would, at that time, definitely.
But
they're not
now that's the
figuring
thing,
out
let's go back to advertising inside of the window. We're gonna regulate that. Oh, no, that one you should have brought to us. Do you see-
Well,
do you see
no,
the- do you see
I-
the dilemma?
I'm fine with what they talked about doing it, but they actually submitted it to council. It got voted down, and now they want to bring it back again. I'm like, why waste your time? It already was voted down once.
Well,
I-
that's the advantage of giving a priority list.
Right,
to the
and
planning board.
absolutely, yeah,
That's the advantage of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that they necessarily wanna bring it back again.
okay,
I think there are people who wish they had a time machine and can go back and approach it differently.
right.
But none of us
I mean,
do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I just don't want to micromanage them to the point of every little thing has to go to council before they can start working on it. That's
No,
all.
and I agree with like Sandy, where she just kind of gives you, hey, here's an update. This is what
Yeah,
we're doing.
yeah, and that's
Yeah,
totally
And the
fine.
rule is that the update has to take less time than the actual conversation did. It's supposed to be a
Right.
summary.
That's
Yeah.
summary thereof. Yeah.
So, I just wanted to give you an update. Resolution 3623 was where we established the fees for the under 75 participants.
36,
So that, resolution number 3623 was where we established the, fees for under 75 for people
Okay.
to leave.
okay, perfect.
But it never got, we never ended up revising the fees, now that I remember correctly,
Okay.
for over 75 participants. So the camping fee structure and all of that never actually, it was in the other resolution that never passed.
So the ordinance that we're working with is still,
Right.
The 100, you
Correct.
collected the right amount, because we had a whole other fee structure set up, and it never made it to the agenda.
So is there a possibility
Even-
to open that back up and?
We should look at.
that was where this whole conversation started, is do we wanna go there again, or do we wanna take a breather?
I'm reading, I'm already reading, I got it, okay.
It sounds like we need to pull the form and make sure that the ordinance would, and the fee structure
It
made
is,
it
it
to the form.
It is, yeah,
It makes
because
the
there's a
form
separate,
easier.
Courtney had a separate small application for the park.
Okay.
Because each park will have different rules on whether or not you can have a dog, whether or not you can, do camping, you know.
I don't
put stakes in
have
the ground.
different forms, it's the
I've
same
never
form
heard
that
that.
they did.
She was supposed to write up her own little form for this resolution number 3623. So that's what you need, is you need an application for under 75 people. You do not have that one then? Courtney had one, I thought.
I'm not aware, and I'm not aware that such a thing exists.
Because it's just a $25 application review fee, $100 cleanup deposit, half-day use fee is 50, full day is 100.
Uh-huh.
So you need a special application for under 75 people?
It's basically to reserve a park, yeah.
Okay.
And what
Or any
fee-
use of city-owned land for a small party that wants to reserve it.
And it would only apply to parks.
Use of city-owned property and streets, sidewalks, alleys, parks, trails, and other city-owned buildings and lands that are held for the city for the benefit. No, it's any city-owned property, but it's under 75 people.
So we could rent this room because it's city-owned property.
If you really want to
Was-
have.
was
a-
that written up, was,
Knock yourself out.
was that written up for the observatory in mind?
No, this was written up for the parks in mind, because Courtney constantly would get phone calls of people wanting to reserve the park, and all she had available was the
bigger one.
bigger one, and it had to go through city council at that time, and this didn't, it just went through.
And now it just comes to the mayor, who the instruction,
This-
as I understood from council, is if they check all the boxes and they fill it out,
Right.
then you approve it.
Pretty much, yeah, as long as they don't,
So, 25 kindergartners in a park,
yep, there you go.
or
You can have
Here.
75 kindergartners in a park with
But
one
you
teacher.
couldn't have them in here, because you can only have 44 in here.
So explain to me that within MOU, I was told with Rotary Park that Rotary would be the ones that would approve reserving the park.
Mhm.
So there is, I think, the best one I can give you an example of, and then we have, this meeting wraps in 2 minutes,
Yeah.
just as FYI, the next one starts in 2. Pride Park, they have an MOU. They inform us of when they're going to be using it, but they don't take any other role in the scheduling or anything that's there. So,
They would have to be the leasing the park, like
and
where they have full control over it. Then,
so up where the rodeo is right now, they lease it, so people go to them because they are the first gate of all scheduling, basically to avoid scheduling conflicts. But they can't sublease it without approval from the airport board, and we've asked the airport board not to approve anything unless they give it to us in a city land use form. And they have agreed to do that, so that's how we have it right now.
that, and that's why
It's,
it's,
well, it's a temporary protocol.
right,
To get it so that we have a land use. The reality is, that one I have from Beartooth Rally, if they had had put their finger up their nose and thumb our nose at us and say, we don't have to do it, they have the lease. If the airport board approved it, they're right, but this is getting us closer to back what the spirit and the intent was.
so, yes, if you want, we do not right now have a separate fee schedule for parties over 75. There is one that spells out the 100 days, but it's for everything, and we probably need to fix that, so it says over 75 participants at the
And the
event.
75 was arrived.
Because most of the things that happen in the city park, you know, like a kid's Christmas, you know, birthday party or whatever, are gonna be under 50 people, you know, and so 75 was what I think Whitefish used to determine a small event versus a larger event.
But you don't know, if you go online and look for the form, we don't see that form anywhere for small parks usage. I do know that we do now have a calendar that is maintained in the front office
Yeah, 'cause
that
Courtney
has
had
all
all of it.
parks
was gonna
and
make
everything in
that-
it.
She
Pardon?
was going to make that, Courtney was gonna have a calendar, so.
So Danae
For all
has
those?
made such a
Okay.
thing,
Oh, good.
and so that we basically have that for scheduling conflicts and everything, so.
okay,
Okay.
all right.
Do we have any comments from the audience that would like us to address anything?
Well,
Hearing none.
are you part of the planning board representative?
I am the planning board representative.
So I'm just encouraged tiny homes, because I've rented to people a room, and they've lived in it for years, and they're perfectly happy. I think the planning board has to think outside of their own personal desires. But there are a group of people out there that want to live in a tiny home, and it makes for a high density, you could have a high density tiny home and have a whole lot of workforce housing.
And ADUs are allowed everywhere, but they are restricted to a certain, I think it's under 400 square feet or less. So, quote, tiny homes are approved. You can have multiple on one lot if it's zoned for multifamily.
Okay.
So,
Wrap your meeting.
All right,
that's it.
all right.
Thank you. And Cynthia, do you have